Howdy, everybody. This is Omar, your Audio Amigo, back with another Audio Amigo review for y'all. Dunu's collab with Timmy the DaVinci has been a consistently popular set basically since it hit the market, and now we have, well, not exactly a follow up or successor, but more of a reimagining of the DaVinci. These are the much less creatively named Dunu 242. This is a tribrid IEM priced at 350 US dollars. This is part of a pair of IEMs from Dunu. The 142 is following along later. But for now, is this, the 242, a true evolution over the DaVinci, or will the 242 sit in the shadow of its more famous predecessor? Well, let's find out. As usual, a quick disclaimer. These were sent to me by HiFiGo for review. I'm not being paid for this review, but because I could turn around and sell this set if I wanted to, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. As always, I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Thank you so much to HiFiGo for sending me these, and thank you to all of you watching for your continued support. The 242's box not only features the rare appearance of a husbando, but inside it is essentially classic Dunu. You get the classic Dunu carry case with the nice embossed logo there, and you get inside the sort of classic Dunu accessories. So you get the Dunu branded cable tie, you get 3.5 and 4.4 millimeter versions of the modular Q-Lock mini connectors. You get a cleaning brush as well as a 1/4 inch adapter, which is nice to see. And then you get 3 full sets of ear tips. So you get a full set of Dunu's candy tips, which I've already sort of opened here. But full set of Dunu candies. You get a full set of Dunu's SNS, which are these ones here. Full set of Dunu SNS tips, and you get a full set of Dunu's more traditional sort of balanced ear tips. Dunu's standard accessories package, which is basically this here, continues to be one of the nicer accessory set on the market. I like that the strap holds in your IEMs here in the bottom. The inside of the case is soft touch, and with the zipper closed, the crush resistance is half decent. There is some bowing that's going on here, but it's overall not too bad. The addition of things like the candy and SNS tips, which are, premium ear tips and cost a fair amount on their own, is always nice to see. Dunu always gives you a nice 1/4 inch adapter. I feel like at $350, it's very nice and it holds up quite well. I still, however, would have liked to have seen a shirt clip or a cleaning cloth, things that I actually use that are just kind of nice to have, but again, for the price, great accessories. So of the 2 modular cables that Dunu offers with their IEMs, this is my preferred version compared to the more shoelace style one found on the Braindance or the Kima 2. This is a 4-wire braid with plastic sleeving. It wraps easily, it behaves well, it sits flat, it doesn't really exhibit any memory or microphonics. The amp connector here is the screw-secured Q-Lock mini connector, which is also captive, so it's not going to slide all the way down the cable if you just leave it open. The connectors are indexed, and those index marks do line up nicely, which is cool. This nut, as well as this little recess here, serves as a great grip point for heavier amps or with certain players. The slimline Y-split matches the rest of the hardware nicely. It also has nice Dunu logo and a grip point there. The chin slider here isn't my favorite. It's just sort of clear plastic, and it just looks different compared to the rest of the hardware. But at least it grabs onto the cables well when you're going on walks, and it sits flush against the Y-split, which, as y'all know, is all I really care about. I also really like these 2-pin connectors. These hooks do not exhibit any crinkle or noise when they're being bent like this, and not only are these recessed connectors on a recessed socket IEM, but they're also color-coded for stereo indication, which y'all know I really tend to prefer. Overall, I really like this cable. Only thing stopping it from being one of my favorite cables, honestly, is the chin slider. If they just made it metal to match the rest of the hardware, this would be an awesome, awesome cable. As far as the build of the IEM itself goes, the 242 here is a full 3D printed resin construction with metal nozzles with metal filters over the end to protect those drivers. As you can see here on the inside, there is no ventilation on the inside of the shells, but like on the Braindance and the Vulcan 2, there are individual vents that exit out of the side of the IEM here by the 2-pin connector. For me personally, those worked really well. I got no driver flex, no pressure buildup issues, hours of easy wear without any sort of ventilation problems for this, so well done, Dunu. The rest of the design, as you can see on the IEM, is actually really quite simple. There's no extraneous acoustic structures or other features to speak about. Full resin IEMs like this are common at this price point, and while some folks might not appreciate these as much as a sort of full metal build, Dunu's resin quality here is very nice. They're using the Haygears 3D printing system, which is always very durable. They feel smooth. They should be able to take a licking and keep on ticking. Let's go ahead and pull up the specifications here for the 242. As you can see, Dunu is doing their sort of staggered dynamic driver configuration on the low end. There's a 10mm driver handling 200 Hz and below, and an 8mm driver taking over from there up to about 800 Hz. From there, it's balanced armatures. There are two nulls handling 800 to 3 kHz and two custom BAs doing 3 kHz to 6 kHz. After that, we have a pair of microplanars that take over and do basically everything above that. This tribrid combo is pretty easy to drive out of basically anything with a headphone jack. Do keep an eye, however, out for output impedance, as these will change sound with higher output impedance devices. We'll talk about that, as usual, a little bit later. Weight on these is around 6.5 grams per shell. Once you throw in the cable, you're looking at a little over 46 grams of total sort of walking around weight. The nozzles here are a little above average at 6.3 millimeters at their widest point, but it's nothing that should be concerning for comfort. This really does read like the spec sheet for DaVinci. I feel like all the specs are overall similar. The 242, however, is lighter, and we've gained a pair of microplanar drivers. Moving on to the cool wall, the 242 honestly is going to be pretty easy. I think this is a very classy and very stylish looking IEM. I really like the sort of swirl fire type pattern they've got going on in the shells here. It really shows up in light rather well. And I really love the sort of classy gold ring that seals it off nicely with the shells. That on top of the sort of dark black resin just makes them look super classy. These will look even cooler next to the 142 once those release. Real fire and ice combo going on there. These might not be sub-zero like Dunu's more cyberpunk-inspired brain dance, but I still think that these are going to wind up in the cool section of the cool wall. They didn't overcook the design or overthink it or overcomplicate it. They kept it elegant, but added enough flair to where someone like me would like them. But it doesn't matter if I like them. Let's see if the gold ring is enough to appeal to the sensibilities of the Council of Ladies. So first off, we have a 3-2 vote in favor of these being pretty or cool. Ladies who are multiples of 2 aren't really impressed by these, however, but the rest of them seem to like them. As far as the starting conversations or earning compliments, lady number 2 switches over and says that she actually would say something, giving us a score of 4-1 in favor of these starting a conversation. Looking at their thoughts, however, it seems red is in demand, unless you're lady number 4, of course. The marbled look of the red seems to have done well with the ladies, but there is some dislike for the font or the sort of way that Dunu executed the printing on the 242. I can't wait to see what they'll think of the 142. I know lady number 4 has a penchant for blue, so maybe she'll come around and like that one more. For now, though, well done, Dunu. These look pretty good. Comfort here on the 242 for me is a pretty standard affair. This is not a sort of semi-custom shape. There's a very slight elevation to this little wing here, but it's not really what I would call a wing. The shells are sort of large-ish, but they're not super heavy. The nozzles are a little above average, but really nothing to worry about. Considering how many drivers they've crammed in here, it's a pretty standard size shell, I would say. What all of that sort of adds up to is a very comfortable IEM that I honestly fell asleep wearing on a 5-hour flight. So for me, zero comfort issues for these, even with that pressure with the changes in altitude, no problems whatsoever. As far as my wife goes, these earned a very surprising score of pass on the tiny ears test. The ear hooks will need a reshaping to actually carry the weight of these shells in her ears, and they did sort of stick out horizontally of her ears a little more than she would have preferred. But she was pretty comfortable with them, and no matter what she could do, she could not get these to break a seal or slide out of her ears. While they weren't the most comfortable things in the world, she did manage to wear these with no discomfort, which I think for an IEM of this size is an achievement. Well done, Dunu. But how does the 242 sound? Well, the bass is boosted, but it is a controlled articulate boost with nice texture that gets energy across without getting too excitable. The bass drops, for example, in Team Tomodachi are impactful, and there's really nice rumble and texture to the low end drops. The decay of the notes doesn't feel slow, the attack is nice and quick. The 8mm driver, I feel, also does a really nice job here. The bass guitar and the taiko drums in Sansei, for example, they have really nice depth and presence in this track. They never get lost when the koto, the shamisen, or the other instruments come in. And while the presence of those instruments is always felt, they never overwhelm the rest of the track, neither does any of the bass instruments. While the bass quantity here isn't as much as some people might want, the bass quality is extremely nice, and the drivers are working very well together. I couldn't really find an instance where I could tell which drivers were handing off, to the other. The coherence overall with the bass drivers is quite nice. The controlled but still energetic bass lends some warmth to the lower mids, but not so much that they feel slow, bloated, or tonally awkward. Holiday, for example, has all of the warmth that I would expect from that track, with the guitars, the drums, the vocals, and the bass guitar all very well separated. They really don't bleed together or mask each other. The track still has good body to it. I thought it was an excellent replay here on 242. Female vocals are where this set starts to really shine, however. Otto's version of the iconic Gegege no Kitaro theme, for example, she has these real gentle whispers. She has some intentionally nasal passages, and then there's some moments where she flat out screams. Uh, Everything is rendered beautifully. You have the plucked koto and the deep drums in the background that are sort of behind. They never really overstep her bounds and intrude on her vocals. Mids on the 242 are clean, clear, very well represented, decent body to the lower mids, and some nice shine on the fundamentals for female vocals. Upper mids and treble here on the 242 are controlled. While there is good energy and power to the harmonics off of female vocals, they aren't as emphasized as they might be on some other sets. That's not to say that female vocals sound flat, rather, the harmonics sound very natural, at least to my ears. Seventh Heaven, for example, still has Vanity's voice coming across as airy, energetic, and a little bit ethereal, but the tonality isn't as harmonic forward as it can be on some other IEMs. With that more forward fundamentals, it helps female vocals have a little bit of rich tonality, a bit more of a natural tone to them. It means that the S and T tones and other sharp harmonic moments on this track are toned down and fairly safe. It's a similar-ish story with the treble. Fleetwood Mac's Dreams and those famous hi-hats and cymbals are controlled, crisp, and still have good sparkle. Never really got fatiguing, at least to me. The decay on them is nice and washy. There's a good sort of airiness to the sound. There's really good energy in the upper treble. That airiness, I don't think, will be to everyone's tastes. Personally speaking, I think that it lends the 242 an extra sense of shimmeriness or clarity, a bit of floatiness, if you will, without going completely overboard into like grainy town. I think it's very well balanced, and the upper mids and treble are well executed. The technical performance on the 242 here is quite strong. The low-end details are rendered very well by the two dynamic drivers in here. The drums and horns at the beginning of the Egg Travels sounded excellent, with each drum hit easily distinguished from the rest by the sort of texture of the hands and the mallets that came through well here. You have the subtle vibrato of the horns as they're buzzing in the low end. It's all rendered beautifully here by the 242. No real complaints from me listening to this track. As far as the higher end of things go, Waltz for Debbie, I think, sounds great here on the 242. The glassware hits and silverware hits are easily audible, and the background conversation was right sort of in that sweet spot window where it's audible, but not completely forward to where it becomes distracting. I think it's a really good all-round technical performance here on the 242, compared to the other sort of high, tri, and quad Brits here at this price point. I would say it's equal to things like the Estrella or the Performer 7, but it doesn't quite reach sort of Dunu brain dance levels of technical performance. It does, however, edge out the DaVinci, which I think is the comparison that most people are looking for here. The stereo separation here on 242 is also quite nice. The cymbal shift effect from Ted Nugent's Stranglehold feels nice and wide to me. The transition from one side to the other is very clean. There's no perceptible shift where it sort of jumps from like left to center to right. It feels like one smooth movement, which is what I get here. Tracks that are mastered in a very like stereo way didn't feel crushed together, and I felt the 242 performed well overall. The 242 will not elevate sort of flatly mastered tracks, but it also won't hold back well-mastered ones. Dolphin Dance, for example, with the bass in the left ear, the drums in the right, the piano in the center, I thought the imaging was very solid here. Ahmad himself sounds forward of the other two instruments, and the track has some decent depth to it. I would say that the 242 is slightly above average when it comes to perceived 3D soundstage and stereo separation, at least amongst IEMs at this price point, with my sort of soundstagey tracks. As with most multi-driver sets with crossovers, the 242 does indeed change its sound when you expose it to higher output impedance sources or when using impedance adapters. Pulling up the graph, we can see that it's honestly pretty simple. The low frequencies gain some energy, the higher frequencies lose some energy. This has the effect of warming up the 242 quite nicely. The bass gains energy and doesn't really distort with heavier notes. It does, however, start to cover up some of those nuances in the treble as it's sort of pushed back a bit by the impedance adapter. I do recommend this configuration for some temporary fun with hip hop or EDM tracks, or if the upper treble is really starting to bother you. Otherwise, I think that the stock tuning is my preferred tuning for most music, but like I said, throw the impedance adapter on there every once in a while. It can be a lot of fun. The 242 then, it really is an evolution on the DaVinci sort of meta-ish tuning. I won't spoil the comparison here, but the 242 is a sort of mildly V-shaped IEM with a bit of a bass boost and a bit of an elevation in the upper treble. I think it's a generally very safe tuning, and I think it works well with lots of different genres and artists. But how does it stack up to not only the DaVinci, but some of the other sort of heavy hitters in this price range? Well, we'll find out by starting with Timmy's most recent collab, the aforementioned Dunu X Giz Audio DaVinci, priced at $300 US. The 242 to me feels like sort of a response to the main complaints that I heard that people have about the DaVinci. The first is that the bass is a little bit overcooked, it can feel a little bit soft, and it can feel a bit woolly. The second is that female vocal harmonics were maybe a little bit over energetic at times. The 242 has fixed those issues if you had them with the DaVinci by toning down the bass and calming down those upper mids and vocal harmonics. The 242 sounds cleaner throughout the mids to me with better separation to instruments, but DaVinci's bass just slaps harder, it just thumps better, and it feels more dynamic. It does come across a little bit slower and less crisp with specific drops or notes here and there, but this can be a lot of fun with some tracks versus the more tight, controlled, uh, sort of quick presentation here on the 242. Female vocals are an interesting comparison. If you prefer forward fundamentals with neutral harmonics, you will prefer the presentation here on the 242. If, however, you like forward vocals and energetic harmonics that give things a bit more of a spotlight and a bit more shine, then I think you'll find yourself preferring the way that the DaVinci presents female vocals. Personally, I can see the case for either one. There were artists where I preferred, either one just depending on my mood. It will depend on your personal preferences. One thing I will say is that both of these sets do have nice airiness to them, but the 242 does come across a little bit more washy and energetic in the top end compared to the DaVinci. If you're sensitive to upper treble energy, then the DaVinci might be the better choice. On the other hand, if you prefer a leaner, cleaner overall presentation with less bass energy and more sort of technical performance, then I think that the 242 might be worth the $50 price increase to you. Next, let's bring in another great microplanar IEM, that being the brand new Ziigaat Horizon, priced at $330 US. These two are pretty similar in terms of overall sound balance, but the differences I think add up to a pretty different sound overall. The Horizon comes across to me as the brighter, more technical, more soundstagey of the two, while the 242 is the warmer, more relaxing listening experience, but with more forward female vocals. The Horizon doesn't punch or slam in the bass as nicely as the 242 does, but it can match or exceed it on the low end in terms of rumble and sort of grunt. Mids are more forward on the Horizon due to the more controlled bass, but female vocal fundamentals are more forward on the 242. The upper mids and treble presentation are roughly similar, but the Horizon does carry a good bit more energy with both female vocal and instrument harmonics, and it's more energetic across the upper treble with sort of the nice airiness that the 242 can have. Uh, I do think that both of these can be potentially fatiguing if you're sensitive in the upper treble. The Horizon is definitely a less safe choice for that compared to the 242. Personally speaking, neither set really bothered me personally over my normal listening sessions. The 242 is the more dynamic sounding set, especially across the low end, and it's a bit more calm at in the treble end of things. So it's sort of, like I said, the warmer sounding of the two. The Horizon, on the other hand, is neutral bright. It's more technical. It's got better sound staginess to it, at least with my tracks. But honestly, both of these I think are great choices. Okay, I can hear you guys saying you like the 242, but you want something Warmer. Well, that's where one of the crowd favorites comes in. It's the Xenns Tea Pro, priced at 360 US dollars. The T Pro is a 242, but it's warmer, bassier, and less vocal forward. It also doesn't have that same like sparkly airiness at the top end of the treble. Mids on the T Pro are very well balanced for what is actually a much warmer, bassier overall set. I would say that the bass quality on the T Pro is similar to the 242. There's just more of it. There's more rumble, there's more punchiness, there's more slam. It's a more dynamic bass presentation. Some folks don't vibe with that bass boost. It's what they don't like about the T Pro. And I would agree that the T Pro isn't as technical sounding of a set as the 242. However, if you're looking for a similar sort of relaxed upper mids and treble presentation that the 242 has, but you want more bass and a little bit less of that upper treble sparkle, the T Pro with its all metal construction, I think, is still a crowd pleaser and a wonderful, warm sounding all round set. So far, everything on the table has presented female vocals differently to the 242. The 242 has very forward fundamentals, which the rest of these haven't really matched. However, that all changes with the $400 Elysian Pilgrim. The Pilgrim is honestly a dead ringer for the sort of tonality of the 242 when it comes to female vocals, as well as the sort of upper mids and treble. The 242 does have that little bit of extra airiness at the top end, but the Pilgrim doesn't come across to me as being any less technical, at least again in my testing tracks. The biggest difference between these two is going to be how they present the mid bass. The 242 is punchier, more energetic, and warmer in that area, whereas the Pilgrim is more separated, cleaner, and as a result has more forward lower mids. While the Pilgrim is cleaner, I wouldn't say that it is lean or thin in the lower mids. There's still some nice warmth here. Honestly, the Pilgrim is essentially a 242 without that airiness and less mid bass. It's safer if you're sensitive to that sort of upper treble energy, and it's more exciting if you sort of dislike how mid bassy some things can be. The Pilgrim is very clean, very clear, and very technical without being fatiguing anywhere. It still has very rumbly, accurate, and tight, crisp sub bass. If, however, you want that warmer, punchier mid bass and you just want a bit more heft in the lower mids, 242 I think is a great choice. I know you guys love it when I do wrap ups where I start by saying that, hey, if you own any of these IEMs, you have a fantastic set and you should be very happy with them. If you are a bass head who likes female vocals and you're looking for some serious punch and slam on the low end, the DaVinci, I think, is an amazing set for you. Just know that the bass might be a little bit soft in terms of attack and decay of notes on some tracks. The T Pro takes sort of the DaVinci and it tones down the upper mids and the mid bass, resulting in a cleaner but still warm and relaxing tonal balance to the set. This is a crowd pleasing IEM for a reason, and the balance does skew warm in a way that a lot of people just really, really love. On the opposite end of the bass spectrum, you have the Pilgrim. It has excellent sub bass rumble, but it's very controlled and clean in the mid bass, and it lifts the mids forward very nicely here. Female vocals are also forward, and the harmonics for vocals and instruments are detailed but not fatiguing at all. Then you have the Ziigaat Horizon. This is a little bit more V-shaped than the Pilgrim. You have a little bit more mid-bass energy and some extra sparkly, airy treble that helps it sound, as I said, a bit brighter overall. The mids here are still forward, but female vocal fundamentals aren't as forward as they are on the Pilgrim or on the 242. Speaking of the 242, this takes a sort of middle ground approach in terms of bass. It's not as energetic as these two, but it has a good bit more energy than these two. In addition, it takes the female vocals and treble presentation from the Pilgrim and adds a little bit of airiness on the top end to help it give that more ethereal sound compared to the Pilgrim. Might be fatiguing to some people, but in my experience, it doesn't really bother me. Honestly, the sort of $250 to $400 price range is getting extremely crowded in terms of nice IEMs. It's going to be pretty difficult to pick one that isn't good, which I think is a good thing overall for the consumer. Time then to pull up the Audio Amigo arbitrary rating scale and figure out where the Dunu 242 is going to wind up. The 242 is a well-accessorized, good-looking, warm, neutral IEM with forward mids and a mostly safe treble presentation. The bass is controlled and textured, and it's boosted just enough so that most people should enjoy it. As an update of the DaVinci, it addresses some of the issues that others seem to have with it. Personally, I wish they would have left a little bit of bass energy in there and just fixed the texture. I think that the DaVinci was a rather unique IEM amongst a sea of meta-ish tunings. It was the bassiest of the meta sets, and it also had really forward and nice female vocal harmonics, which gave it sort of a clubby J-poppy tonality that I really enjoyed. The 242, however, is still its own thing. I feel that the competition will be maybe a little bit fiercer for the 242 now that the tuning has become a bit more standardized. I still think that it is a stellar IEM, however, and I can see a ton of people picking these up as sort of great all rounders. That little bit of spice in the air frequencies might be a point of contention for people who are sensitive in that area, and there will be some people that, as I said, will want either more or less bass than what this offers. But honestly, this is brilliant. I think that Dunu really cooked with these. I'm very excited to try the 142 long term as well. I think that those two are an interesting sort of counterpoint to each other. The 142 and the Ito have made some very compelling options lately from Dunu. I think they're kind of on a roll here with these new releases. I do have an Ito in house. Review for that is coming, and I'm hoping Dunu will send me a 142 because they just look so nice next to these. But let's go ahead and get into the recommendation section. I wouldn't honestly recommend these to bass heads, as this level of mid bass might not be what they're looking for. And I also wouldn't recommend this to treble heads for the same reason. There is some nice airiness, but it's probably not enough or balanced well enough for treble heads. The bass boost here also means that this isn't exactly a neutral set, so I would pass on it for mixing or mastering work. If, however, you're looking for something with less bass than most of the meta tunings out there on the market tend to have, and you want a more vocal forward presentation with controlled harmonics, the 242 I think represents an excellent choice. This also makes a good upgrade from the more budget minded meta sets if you're looking for something with more clarity and detail in a more neutral tuned package. Finally, if you're the type of person that jumps into the hobby at $350, I think that this is a great sort of IEM starter kit. While it is a lot of money, this tuning will help you figure out your preferences, and the presence of two sets of premium ear tips and all the adapters and a very nice cable means that you can jump from this to something that you would enjoy even more. I think that this is a pretty fantastic first IEM. Dunu did great here. I honestly really quite like the 242. And that's going to wrap up the review for the 242. I didn't quite manage to get this out in time for the release date, but everything sort of surrounding CanJam Dallas was extremely hectic, even if the show itself wasn't all that hectic. So at least I got this out while the sales are happening. Speaking of sales, I do have a sort of kind of buyer's guide coming. It's going to be different from the one I did last year. I just feel there's a lot of buyer's guide coming out sort of in that style. I'm going to try to do something a little bit different, but that should still be very helpful to people. I also have a bunch of reviews coming down the pipeline. So look forward to those. For now, however, thank you so very much for watching. Massive shout out to the Compadres Club members. I did sort of get a vlog filmed at CanJam Dallas. I hope you guys are ready for a very scuffed, thrown together CanJam Dallas vlog. So look forward to that as a membership exclusive. For those of you who aren't members, $5 a month. You get to decide what I review with your money. You help make the channel more independent and less reliant on samples and tours, which personally I very much appreciate. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.